This is the blossoming sword song, striking and slashing attacks performed in conjunction with melody and metaphor. The Wittic are snares, the fan strikes are drum beats, the combinations are marching drum cacophonies. It has been long said that the only time the people of the Rajanate are not singing are when they are sick, asleep, or dead. This is doubly true for the sword poet, an elite discipline of Kadunganan that focuses on fighting while singing. Even in battle, even without the accompaniment of agung, they sing a song of beauty and sorrow, one that wrenches the hearts of enemies, forces them to rethink, or performs innumerable provocations. Through their sword song, they protect their culture, community, and nature. These warrior poets, through their battles and shared techniques, use their words and songs to defend their fellow men, letting their violence-charged verses and words strike the hearts of enemies that attack their allies, like the ogres they are. Their heart-wrenching melodies force enemies to focus on the warrior poet, lest they face the weight of the world. Their gahum emanates from them, carried upon the winds of their words, strengthening allies and crippling enemies. This philosophy has created a subset of Hyang faith called Hyang Aoydan, which focuses on the philosophy that song is the source of all life, and that diwa is a harmony constantly played across all time, and is what connects all things together. The sword is in itself a metaphor, a calcification of the core tenet of Hyang, the dichotomy of cause-effect, love evisceration, the condensation of idiom into a weapon used to cut, as that is the only permitted course of action. An attack is a beat is part of a rhythm, an entire attack is a song, a poem. With biting remarks comes specifically crafted verbal attacks that flay a warrior's defenses, and makes you insufferable, and brings all the attention to the sword poet. Not just that, but whenever sword poets sing, they echo similes and metaphors and personifications in a different language, one more flowery and filled with impossible metaphors and idioms that only they can truly understand. This language is known as flower tongue, and it is said to be the most beautiful language never spoken, only sung. When you become a sword poet, ask yourself, why do you fight for a land that does not hear the notes of your sorrow song? Your song falls upon staggered ears and corpses. Will you wait until your song ends? Hello viewers and welcome to a brand new episode of Trashtalk on Gubat Banwa, where I talk about the various disciplines you can play as within. And in today's episode, let's talk about the sword poet. Sword poet is a sentinel, but whereas the Buwayal Lancer is a sentinel by riding on a giant fucking crocodile, sword poet is a sentinel by being annoying as shit with music. Let's take a look at it straight. Flower tongue, which gives the sword poet 10 health, 4 speed, 2 jump, and +1 to posture and resilience, making them quite tough and somewhat speedy. Also, at the end of your riv, taunt all enemies in burst 1 until the end of your next riv, reducing their attack capability against anyone but you, but if they attack you, you have overwhelming defense against them, and since defense tooth is a d8, you have 12.5% chance to roll another defense tooth, higher than with an attack tooth. Also if they do attack you, you get to confuse them, giving them 25% chance to waste an attack and hit themselves in their face. Like most if not all sentinels, sword poet wants to stick right next to the enemies, almost breathing down their neck, but instead of just attacking anyone that gets too close, sword poet wants to attract attacks to absorb them for their allies instead. Practically their entire trait is about damage mitigation, and even if the taunted enemies still attack their allies, it would hurt a lot less. But, like all disciplines, sword poet is not complete without its inflict violence. Song of blood. First, mocking sword, attack an adjacent fighter with faith and taunt them until they hit you, and then you may push them too. You want someone to stay taunted longer than usual, this is one way to do it. You could even push them by 2 afterward, maybe push them into a trap or pit or something for more pain. Second, sword ambahan, attack all enemies in burst 1 with faith. All enemies taunted by you suffer +1d damage, the shockwave from this attack extinguishes fires and removes haze too. What's the point of making all enemies piss off at you if you don't get to slash them harder for it? This is what you do if you get ganged up by a whole bunch of taunted enemies. Also about the second sentence, what this means is that the sword poet can clear up fire and haze terrains with this inflict violence, meaning the sword poet also doubles as a firefighter. It might be useful in only a certain situation, but better to have it than not have it. And third, devastating curse, attack an enemy within 2 tiles with faith then debilitate them, just a simple attack to reduce the damage potential of an enemy if they refuse to stick close to you. Again, like I just said, sword poet is almost all about damage mitigation by taunting or debilitating as many enemies as possible, but if they decided to attack you for it, I recommend spinning attack. Now, let's take a look at its signature techniques. First, poem of swords and spears, Give all allies in burst 2 +1 dice to their next attack, and then taunt all enemies in the burst 2 until the end of their next rift, and all haze tiles in the burst also gets blown away. So besides the obvious damage boost to your allies, taunt also works a tad differently here. The Sword Poet taunt in their trait lasts until end of Sword Poet's next rift, which means you want to delay your turn to make it last longer. That's one drawback or boon in a way. Here, that doesn't matter, because it lasts until the end of the target's rift, so you can be sure it's on until the targets start moving. Also you gonna see this a lot. This technique can also be upgraded to Tandava Blades. All taunted enemies by this are also slowed, and Sword Glossolalia, slide each enemy in the burst by 3 spaces and then also dazzle them. Both of these upgrades basically throw in even more pain towards the enemies, just to make their lives a little worse. Second, Poem of Naga and Garuda. You sing a dragon song and basically, all allies in burst 2 may move 2, while all enemies in the same burst are pulled 1 and then debilitated. All haze tiles in the burst also gets blown away. This is basically both a mobility support and control technique at once. Letting your allies move while pulling enemies in towards you, making them debilitated is also nice too. This technique can be upgraded to let the dragon hear my plea. All allies in the burst now fly 2 instead, giving them even more mobility, and I want all the gods kneeling. The effects of this technique now targets the entire battlefield. So yeah, range limit, what is that? I have never heard of that before. You want to debilitate every enemy on the battlefield at once, this is it. After unlocking 2 of the Sword Poet's techniques, you also unlock their enlightenment, Sword Rhetoric. When you hit an enemy, mark them with a biting remark until the end of your next rift. When the marked target makes an attack, remove the mark and inflict 1 hit against them. If the attacker is taunted, inflict 2 hits instead. This is just one other way for the Sword Poet to take advantage of all the taunts they have thrown out. You literally utter remarks so toxic it makes people die of cringe. That's amazing. Third technique in the list, Poem of Flowers and Rivers. Heal 1 to all allies in burst 2, and then all enemies in the burst gets confused. All haze blah blah, you know the rest already. This technique keeps your allies alive just a little longer by healing them and making the enemies unable to use their action effectively. Just another way to protect them. This technique can also be upgraded to let there be no other road but me to heal 2 instead, and additionally, all enemies in the burst is also taunted by you until the end of your next rift, and no mud, no lotus, no gloom, no joy. This now extends to the entire battlefield and allies also get +1 dice to their next attack. You want to heal people no matter where they are, this is it. Lastly, Poem of Hopes and Dreams. Choose an ally that has not yet ripped in range 3, they can riff right after you. Instead of just waiting for another enemy to take their turn, you and a selected ally can immediately dish out attacks to hopefully finish off some enemies so they couldn't even take their turn. That's one way to mitigate damage. This technique can also be upgraded to become Determination. Choose 2 allies in range 4 instead, as if 1 wasn't enough, and we who are made of love. At the start of the next resound, all allies may rip first before enemies do, which is nuts. However, your posture and resilience fall to 1 until the end of your next rip, which is quite bad for you and your team, as it means that if you are the main sentinel of the team is now defenseless because you cannot take hits whatsoever, presumably because you are singing way too damn hard to focus on your defense, so you really want to use this one carefully. After unlocking 4 of the Sword Poet's techniques, you also unlock their liberation, Side Sar Gubat, in which on resound 3+, you may sing the Song of Life and Death. Spend 2 beats to choose a single fighter on the battlefield that can hear you. Until the end of violence, they cannot do shit to hurt anyone, as in they cannot attack or perform any hostile action. For Braves and Chiefs, it just reduces their rip by 1, which is still very potent because they both have multiple rips in a single resound. Again, everything about the Sword Poet is damage mitigation, and if the one way to do it is singing a song that makes an enemy unable to be violent at all, the Sword Poet will make it happen. Just remember that it only stops someone from attacking or performing any hostile action. A medium using support technique will do just fine against this song, so is running the hell away. And that's basically it on Sword Poet, master of song and sword that can cut deep and debilitate people with both just fine. Anyway, that's all for now, and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell button. If you really want to support my channel, you could visit my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.